Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a vast stack of sources, articles, intelligence reports, and geopolitical analysis and really just distill it down for you.
Yep, into the crucial, actionable knowledge you need.
Our mission, and it's always tailored for you, the learner, is simple. We want to give you the shortcut to being comprehensively well-informed.
And that includes all the surprising facts and, the context that actually links them all together.
Today, the sources we've analyzed, they paint a really dramatic picture.
It's not a story of isolated incidents at all. It's about systemic vulnerability. And we're talking about the highest levels of global power.
So we're looking at a world where these geopolitical flashpoints are colliding head-on with, what, industrial realities.
Industrial realities and these deep-seated historical grievances. The unifying insight we keep finding, it's this.
Okay.
The largest, most established empires are now vulnerable. And not just to military challenge, but to seemingly minor failures.
Like what kind of failures?
Well, it could be crushing economic debt, a critical shortage of a single, maybe inexpensive component, or the coordinated rise of alternative power centers that are actively building these counter-architectures.
Absolutely. This deep dive feels less like observing a military clash and more like, I don't know, conducting a stress test on a failing global system.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our journey starts with what's being called the most definitive new weapon on the global stage, artificial intelligence.
And how its arrival is coinciding precisely with the visible struggle of the established global empire, the U.S.
A struggle against its own massive internal economic decay. From there, we'll dissect the shocking fragility of the industrial war machine, analyze the new BRICS counter-architecture that is challenging global norms, and then we'll wrap up. We'll look at major conflict zones from Eastern Europe to Latin America before diving into some deep political controversies and, frankly, unsettling historical patterns of conflict.
It's a comprehensive look at how interconnected everything is. If you're searching for those aha moments, the surprising details that explain how silver exports relate to railway maintenance in a distant conflict, you'll find them as we get into the core industrial and logistical data.
Okay, let's unpack this core argument right away because it is deeply provocative and it's fundamental to all our sources.
We're doing.
Artificial intelligence is being framed as the new nuclear bomb, and its arrival is perfectly timed to expose the underlying fragility of the established global power.
We are referring to the U.S., of course, which the sources note is visibly struggling. I mean, the national debt is sitting around an eye-watering $37 trillion.
$37 trillion. And that figure is just being accelerated daily by political leaders borrowing more and more money just to sustain the current system.
What's crucial here, though, is understanding the history of that debt and what it actually financed. For decades, the U.S. acted as the undisputed global bully.
And its weapon of choice wasn't really missiles.
No, not primarily. Its most effective weapon was the U.S. dollar and its status as the world's reserve currency. That's the key.
Because that status allowed the country to effectively just print the money it needed to run its massive military machine.
Exactly. Essentially building and projecting global power at zero real cost to its domestic economy, while every other nation on the planet had to produce hard goods or, resources just to earn that same currency.
And that system is now fundamentally eroding.
It is. The challenge is coming from a global competitor, specifically China, which is now either economically equal to, or you could argue demonstrably larger than, the U.S. when measured by purchasing power parity.
So those old GDP measurements were a bit misleading.
The sources suggest they were. They heavily factored in U.S. consumption, which masked the true underlying disparity in industrial capacity and long-term economic strength.
So if the dollar's influence is waning and the established power is in decline, AI becomes the ultimate next-generation tool.
The tool to try and maintain global leadership.
Precisely.
And what's the ultimate prize in this race? The ultimate prize is control over artificial superintelligence, or ASI. This is the inflection point.
The point of no return?
Absolutely. Whoever gains control over AGI or ASI first and manages to build enough of a technological and industrial buffer to maintain that lead will fundamentally reshape human civilization.
The sources are pretty clear on this.
They are. This has shifted the arms race from traditional ballistic missiles into a pure technological and infrastructural race for dominance.
But the strategies used by these two major powers, the U.S. and China, couldn't be more different. We see this vast dichotomy in their approach to achieving AI dominance.
Completely opposed. The U.S. approach, which is driven by a certain political and corporate culture, often favors these massive, sudden, headline-grabbing initiatives.
What does that look like in practice?
One source described it as a preference for Stargate-like half-trillion-dollar infrastructure projects. These are huge bets on single, massive technological leaps.
Okay, and the competitor's approach?
China, conversely, uses what is described as a highly effective death-by-a-thousand-cuts approach. It's much more methodical.
So they're not going for the big home run.
No. They are consistently investing smaller foundational amounts across a wide range of complementary technologies and infrastructure. They're slowly but surely establishing technological parity, and that forces the established power into these reactive, often aggressive spending cycles.
And this difference in strategy, it exposes a crucial weakness for the U.S., doesn't it? It connects the AI race right back to those underlying debt and industrial issues we talked about.
It really does. The key weakness identified is the U.S.'s profound lack of investment in the domestic energy infrastructure needed to power these massive AI machines.
They focused on the software, but not the hardware to run it.
Or the grid to power the hardware. They focused on the cutting-edge chips, but they've neglected the physics. Running massive data centers that train AGI models requires continuous, cheap, abundant power.
And China is all in on power generation.
All in. They're effectively investing everywhere, burning fossil fuels, installing massive solar infrastructure at a record pace, and going full throttle on nuclear power. All of it is to ensure they have the necessary, reliable energy base.
It's a classic tortoise and the hare situation.
It is. You can dump billions into the latest GPU chips, but if you don't have the electrical grid stability and sheer generation capacity to run them domestically, you are permanently handicapped.
That sounds like a fundamental failure in long-term strategic planning. It's a short-term bet on software winning over physical infrastructure and, basic physics.
It is, and the surprising outcome of this arms race illustrates the duality of power today.
What do you mean by duality?
Well, while power is concentrating at the highest technological level, whoever controls ASI, that very power is being offset simultaneously by cheap distributed weaponry. The superintelligence dictates strategy, but the low-cost weapon still wins the tactical exchange.
This brings us to that famous analogy, the $3,000 drone versus the $1 million missile. It's an economic equation of war.
Exactly. Our sources highlight that cheap AI-enabled weapons, like off-the-shelf drones costing maybe $3,000 each, can effectively overwhelm and defeat high-tech million-dollar defense systems.
We've seen this play out in real time.
We have. We've seen examples where one powerful continental bloc was forced to spend up to $1 million per missile just to shoot down $20,000 drones supplied by another state.
That's an unsustainable ratio.
It's a devastatingly effective economic war strategy. The goal isn't just to destroy the target. The goal is to deplete your opponent's high-value inventory.
By forcing them to expend expensive, non-replenishable assets to defend against low-value, easily replaceable targets.
Yes, that cost disparity alone creates a fatal, unsustainable equation for the high-tech superpower in any kind of protracted conflict.
That economic vulnerability brings us perfectly to the next major theme, industrial warfare and the critical fragility of the supply chain.
A huge topic.
The discussion shifts now from the future threat of AI dominance to the very immediate current weakness of the existing military-industrial base. The sources are sounding the alarm. They're indicating a state of Pentagon panic, noting that the U.S. military manufacturing base is essentially running on empty.
And this is due to 3 decades of industrial neglect and aggressive outsourcing.
This industrial neglect, this is the core vulnerability that China has exploited brilliantly, right?
Absolutely. For a long time, the U.S. weapon of choice was financial. The power of the dollar, freezing assets, using blacklists, cutting adversaries off from global banking systems.
The assumption was that controlling the money meant controlling the world.
Yes. But the competitor, China, has now countered that financial might with a much more potent physical weapon, control over the supply chain itself.
That is the difference between pure financial warfare and true industrial warfare.
It's the critical difference. When China sanctioned U.S. defense firms, they didn't waste time freezing bank accounts. They stopped the flow of critical raw materials.
And that creates a catastrophe for major defense contractors.
A complete catastrophe. These companies build advanced, highly specialized systems like surveillance planes, advanced radar, and spacecraft. Their assembly lines rely on these complex global supply chains that inevitably run through Chinese factories and processing centers.
And this is creating what one source aptly terms the boomeranga effect. The very sanctions that the U.S. designed to cripple China are instead hitting the U.S. military-industrial base because American companies are so dependent on Chinese processed material.
It shows that financial legislation cannot override physical reality.
Right. You absolutely cannot legislate your way out of a raw material shortage.
This is the famous impossibility of applying a software patch for physics. The U.S. outsourced the processing of essential materials.
What kind of materials are we talking about?
Materials like gallium, which is crucial for advanced radar systems and high-powered lasers, germanium, which is critical for fiber optics and infrared optics, and antimony, a key material required for the primers in bullets and specialized alloys.
And China controls the processing for most of these.
The vast majority of global processing. So when China restricts exports, the supply lines for the U.S. military just stop.
It's a harsh reality.
It is. You can print another $1 trillion, but you cannot print a refinery or a functioning mine. Rebuilding that kind of complex industrial base takes a decade or more, and the established power simply doesn't have that kind of strategic timeline left.
It sounds like the prioritization of short-term corporate profit through outsourcing has effectively created a fatal vulnerability in national security.
It absolutely has. And China knows exactly where to apply the pressure, turning the dial slowly on key exports.
So what are they communicating with that?
They are essentially communicating, you want to confront us geopolitically, fine, but you will have to do it without our necessary materials. Without these essential materials, the high-tech production lines for precision-guided munitions and sophisticated radar systems rapidly grind to a halt.
It underscores that long-forgotten principle: logistics wins wars.
Yes. The financial giant is proving to be an industrial dwarf, and China holds the kill switch embedded deep within the global supply chain.
And as an immediate, visible demonstration of this industrial power, we have a looming shock coming in the commodity markets that affects everything from defense systems to electric vehicles. The silver export crisis.
This is a critical near-term development detailed in our sources. China is set to impose export restrictions on silver starting the first of the year.
And that's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. That move removes approximately 13% of the world's total supply from the market.
And silver isn't just for jewelry.
Not even close. It's a critical industrial component for next-generation chips, solar panels, defense wiring, and electric vehicle batteries.
And the demand inside China is high.
Incredibly high. So high that it is trading at a significant premium overseas. We're talking about prices around $85 an ounce compared to the standard global exchange rate.
So what does that price difference cause?
It's causing arbitrage traders to literally buy physical silver in major financial centers like New York and London and ship it physically to China to meet that ferocious industrial demand.
That physical movement of the commodity, the arbitrage, it proves the point better than any financial statement could.
Right. The physical stuff is needed, regardless of what the paper markets in the West say.
And this signals a profound structural change in global economics.
It does. And this move on silver, along with activities China is systematically pursuing in commodity-rich regions like Peru and Chile, it's all part of a decades-long strategic investment.
This is the Belt and Road Initiative we hear so much about.
That's the one. It's often narrowly viewed through a simple trade lens, but in reality, it's a grand infrastructure play designed to secure global commodities and ensure industrial supply for the next century.
So China is demonstrating conclusively that industrial power control over the physical resources required to build things is far superior to the power of simply printing money.
They've secured their foundation, and now they are systematically restricting the raw materials of their rivals.
The shifting power dynamics we've just discussed, the debt crisis, the AI race, and these industrial choke points, they're not just characterized by conflict, but by the conscious creation of alternatives.
That's right.
This brings us squarely to the BRICS bloc, which is emerging not merely as an economic alignment, but as a genuine counter-architecture to established global institutions.
Especially those dominated by the U.S. and its allies.
So what's so fascinating about the expanded BRICS bloc right now?
It's their unified approach to navigating the AI age. The dominant global narrative, championed by the established power, has framed the AI debate as a singular race. Who builds the fastest model? Who controls the cutting-edge chips?
And BRICS is shifting that focus.
Consciously shifting it. They realize they may not win the initial technological sprint, but they are prioritizing a cohesive joint approach to ensure they have a decisive seat at the table where the rules of the AI era are written.
Their goal is to prevent a future where technological and governance power is monopolized entirely by a handful of Western governments and corporations.
Exactly. This is about strategic resilience and geopolitical insurance, ensuring that technological power isn't used as a coercive weapon against developing and emerging economies.
And the sources highlight a crucial development here.
Yes. In July of 2025, BRICS leaders adopted a joint statement on the global governance of AI. This document is not some passive agreement
It's a foundational attempt to establish universal and equitable regulation principles.
built with the global majority in mind. They are defining ethical standards that prioritize development and access, countering what they view as a Western-centric approach to AI rules.
And in parallel, they are building the infrastructure to support that alternative governance. Can you elaborate on the new institutions being created?
Yes, a full ecosystem is emerging. Our sources detail the establishment of the BRICS Institute for Future Networks.
And this isn't just an academic endeavor.
Not at all. Its function is to research and build alternative digital backbones and communication standards that are sovereign and resilient, potentially bypassing existing Western-controlled internet infrastructure.
So they can ensure secure data exchange among member states.
Precisely. You also have the BRICS plus AI Alliance, initiated by one of the founding members, aimed at joint research and development, and various joint expert councils focused on standardizing everything from e-commerce protocols to satellite technology.
These are the physical and digital structures of an alternative sphere designed to shape global standards from the bottom up.
That's it.
But the established powers aren't simply watching this counter-architecture materialize without a response.
No, not at all. The rise of BRICS as a genuine alternative power center has triggered significant and coordinated pushback from the U.S. and its allies.
What are the main methods they're using?
Our sources identify three main methods. First is technological containment.
Which means tightening export controls on advanced chips and software.
Yes, attempting to fragment the bloc's technological development and force swing countries like India or Brazil to remain tethered to the Western supply chain.
And the second method.
Second is narrative pressure. This is where the BRICS initiatives are routinely framed in Western media as being authoritarian, repressive, or opaque.
Which undermines their legitimacy and appeal among undecided nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America.
And third is competition through parallel platforms.
So Western-backed initiatives like massive data center investments and rival AI alliances are launched in key BRICS target regions.
To crowd out and financially challenge BRICS-led projects.
Exactly.
This sounds intensely reminiscent of the Cold War with us or against us mentality.
It really does.
And that makes the strategic position of swing members like India particularly complex and critical for global stability.
India is perhaps the clearest and most sophisticated example of multi-alignment in practice today.
They are simultaneously deepening high-level cooperation within BRICS and are notably set to chair the bloc in 2026, while actively maintaining critical technological, military, and economic compatibility with Western norms.
And this multi-alignment strategy isn't accidental.
No, it is driven directly by the increasing unpredictability of the U.S.'s long-term commitments in the tech sector and the frequent use of coercive measures like sudden sanctions and shifting export controls.
So when a major powers word or commitment is unreliable, any prudent state has to diversify its partnerships.
You have to. You have to diversify your technological dependency.
And we saw the geopolitical friction this creates clearly illustrated when a former U.S. president publicly questioned India's loyalty after its leader met with the Russian president and the Chinese president.
A demand for full, exclusive allegiance, essentially.
Yes.
And that reaction perfectly illustrates the entrenched difficulty that multipolar states face. They seek true non-alignment, the ability to deal with all major powers equally. But the established power views this independence as a challenge to its hegemony.
And we also have to acknowledge the internal dynamics of the BRICS grouping itself.
Of course. While India works with China on the economic and governance fronts, there are deep-seated historical concerns regarding the power disparity and unresolved border issues between them.
So for multipolarity to truly succeed, the key large powers need to cement strong, consensus-based institutions within BRICS.
Institutions that ensure no single member, even the largest economy, can dictate policy. This requires both internal unity and an external acceptance from the established power, that global dominance is no longer a viable policy goal.
We shift now from the high-level politics of AI and economic architecture to the brutal, grinding reality of current military conflicts in Eastern Europe.
And here we find one of the most surprising examples of systemic failure.
The core logistics of Russia's massive military machine being crippled not by missiles, but by a failure of its industrial supply chain.
This detail is astonishing, and it validates the critique that logistics is the ultimate weapon. The sources confirm that the greatest blow to Russia's military machine did not come from a frontline assault, but from a technical collapse affecting its core logistical doctrine.
And that doctrine is all about railroads.
Russia is fundamentally a railway army. Given its immense geographic size, harsh climate, and lack of comprehensive modern road infrastructure suitable for heavy military transport, its entire logistical strategy relies almost exclusively on railway lines.
Moving heavy armor, fuel, ammunition, everything.
Everything. And that entire system is being stopped by a precision metal component that costs about $10.
Okay, let's detail that $10 component crisis. This is a story of how a tiny industrial piece can trigger catastrophic geopolitical effects.
The crisis is centered on the cassette-type tapered roller bearing.
What does that do?
To understand its importance, you have to know that modern freight wagons are designed for 25-ton axle loads,
Which is the capacity required to move main battle tanks, heavy coal shipments, and specialized military freight.
right? And these high loads require precision bearings that can withstand immense stress and thermal cycling over vast distances. The original suppliers of these critical components were Western manufacturers, Swedish, American, and others, who immediately withdrew from the Russian market after the conflict began.
So Russia was forced to turn to its allies for reverse-engineered copies, but the quality of the material science was fatally insufficient.
It failed catastrophically due to material science limitations. The original Western bearings utilized something called vacuum degassed steel technology,
Which is expensive, but ensures supreme structural density and integrity.
allowing a bearing to operate reliably for up to 800,000 kilometers. The Allied copies, however, were made with lower quality steel, often lacking the necessary purity. This leads to rapid material failure under load.
What's the technical term for that failure?
It's known as spalling. It's when tiny fragments of metal flake off due to fatigue and thermal stress. Where the original components lasted 800,000 kilometers, the local copies disintegrate after only 80,000 kilometers.
A tenfold reduction in operational life?
Yes, and this seemingly small mechanical failure on a single wheel set triggers total system paralysis across thousands of miles of track.
It creates systemic thrombosis, a total blockage of the logistical artery.
That's it. When these low-quality bearings rapidly overheat under load due to friction and spalling, specialized trackside sensors called hot box detectors immediately identify the thermal anomaly and automatically lock the train down.
As a mandatory safety measure.
Right. And a single lockdown train in the middle of a massive logistical chain immediately halts dozens of crucial trains queued behind it: freight, military supplies, passenger lines.
And it's not just the bearings.
No. Compounding this, the primary modern Russian locomotives themselves are dependent on high-pressure fuel injectors and specialized engine management systems powered by German technology, the supply of which has dropped to zero due to sanctions.
The subsequent strategy for industrial survival sounds absolutely desperate: systematic cannibalization.
It is arguably the most desperate strategy employed by an industrialized nation since World War II. Intelligence reports confirm that approximately 50,000 strategic freight cars are being stripped.
50,000, that's 15 to 20% of the entire strategic fleet.
Stripped of critical parts, including functional bearings, just to keep other trains marginally functional. This practice of cannibalization is a short-term band-aid that masks the true depth of the crisis, but it triggers a catastrophic cascading technical failure.
How so?
Reused, fatigued parts massively increase the risk of catastrophic accidents and derailments by an estimated 300%. The internal decay of the railway system is now fundamentally structural.
The ultimate impact of this logistical death spiral is seen directly on the battlefield. Sources note that acute locomotive shortages and railway blockages are directly responsible for 93% of the recorded freight loading decline across the system.
This is the fatal bottleneck. The military consequences are immediate and severe.
So even if massive quantities of artillery ammunition are available,
For example, those supplied in bulk by allies.
they physically cannot reach the front lines quickly enough.
The logistical conveyor belt has essentially ground to a halt. Fuel supply lines are blocked. Tanker cars are sitting motionless behind broken locomotives or in backed-up rail yards.
And field commanders are experiencing acute shortages.
They're mistakenly attributing them to production problems, when in reality, the ammunition is manufactured, loaded, and stuck thousands of kilometers away.
It's a system-wide failure.
Russia's rail freight transport volume has collapsed to its lowest level in 15 years, proving undeniably that the true power of an empire is not measured by the firepower of its missiles, but by the reliability of the wheels of the trains that transport them.
Turning now to the current war status, the Russian president recently stated clearly that if the opposing side does not negotiate peacefully, Russia will achieve all its objectives by military means.
And that includes creating a buffer safety zone along the contact line.
That statement carries significant weight because it reflects the current military realities.
It does. The pace of Russian advances along the contact line means that previous negotiation terms, specifically the withdrawal of Russian military forces from certain regions specified in old peace plans, are now de facto reduced to zero.
Territory gained shifts the entire diplomatic baseline,
making any return to the status quo antebellum highly unlikely through negotiation.
On the diplomatic side, a former U.S. president discussed a potential return to previous negotiation terms, favoring a bilateral approach that specifically excludes an immediate ceasefire.
Right.
Meanwhile, the leader of the opposing side is reportedly asking for substantial financial aid for reconstruction, somewhere between $700 and $800 billion.
Alongside security guarantees lasting an extraordinary 50 years.
The scale of that financial aid request underscores the total destruction and the subsequent rebuilding needed, but the political situation remains complicated.
And this also raises the crucial question of accountability for the vast sums already sent.
Right. Despite huge aid packages continuing to flow from international partners, controversy remains due to persistent corruption allegations.
Our sources mention that the NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine, is actively investigating a new scandal involving votes for money.
And this is targeting members of the opposing leader's inner circle and ruling party.
Yes. Even as those hundreds of billions in international aid are approved and delivered, this domestic political instability further complicates the ability of international partners to sustain long-term financial commitments.
Moving now from Eastern Europe to the Middle East, we see intense coordinated pressure around the current conflict zone, specifically concerning the Allied regime's prime minister and the conflict in Gaza.
What's deeply unsettling here is the alleged political maneuverings detailed in the sources. The Allied regime's prime minister is reportedly lobbying a former U.S. president.
Lobbying him how?
Arguing that the threat of a major war against a regional adversarial country, Iran, is a necessary political component for achieving a long-term settlement.
And crucially, he is linking this threat directly to the established military goal of destroying the resisting group in Gaza.
This framing suggests that a major regional escalation is being viewed by some as a prerequisite for achieving domestic and strategic political success.
Furthermore, allegations persist regarding the depth of operational support provided by the U.S.
Yes. Sources allege that the military of the Allied regime is routinely utilizing the intelligence and targeting data provided directly by the U.S. for its major attacks in the region.
And meanwhile, the Allied regime is proceeding with significant long-term plans on the ground in Gaza.
Specifically, the documented construction of 13 permanent military bases across 58% of the Gaza territory. This is not temporary occupation.
No, this infrastructure build-out suggests a permanent structural military presence is being established in the territory itself.
It does.
And how is the resisting group preparing for this continued military pressure and permanent infrastructure build-up?
The resisting group is reportedly preparing for long-term, sustained retaliation and resistance. They are operating from hardened positions, often deep underground, designed to be highly resistant to damage from high explosive ordnance.
And they've learned lessons from previous clashes.
Importantly, yes. Specifically, they noted that the Allied regime's highly touted missile defenses ran out of interceptors in earlier conflicts.
A critical observation.
It is. And it informs the resisting group's own calculus regarding the deployment and sustained use of their missile capabilities, creating an environment of intense, long-term military preparation on both sides of the conflict.
Let's shift dramatically across the globe to Latin America, where we have intervention rhetoric being aggressively pushed by a former U.S. president concerning one particular country, Venezuela.
The former U.S. president has committed to using the full power of the U.S. military to destroy cartels in Venezuela, framing the entire sovereign state as a criminal nexus.
And experts are warning against this.
Universally. They warn that this strategy, driven by a simplistic belief that military force can resolve complex societal and geopolitical issues, is extremely dangerous and could lead to a major foreign policy failure akin to the catastrophic invasion of Iraq decades ago.
And the foundational justification for this potential military action has been exposed as politically fabricated.
This is a textbook example of manufactured intelligence used for strategic political ends. A high-ranking U.S. official recently asserted publicly that Venezuela was the #1 drug trafficker in the Western Hemisphere.
Citing a specific UN document as evidence.
Yes. However, when analysts consulted the cited UN report, the claim was proven unequivocally false. The word Venezuela appeared only twice in the entire document, with absolutely no mention of it being a major trafficking nexus or the #1 source.
This is a deliberate misrepresentation.
It's a tactic used to transform a sovereign state into a designated criminal enterprise, thereby justifying law enforcement operations or full-scale military action against it in violation of the UN Charter and established international law.
Beyond the legal and moral issues of violating sovereignty, what about the pure military reality of attempting such an intervention?
Military experts are sounding loud warnings. An intervention would be militarily unsound, replicating the exact planning mistakes made during the previous major foreign policy failure in the Middle East.
How so?
Venezuela is geographically immense. It is 3 times the size of Vietnam, heavily jungled, mountainous, and lacks the infrastructure that would allow for easy maneuver.
And U.S. forces are structurally inadequate for such a task.
With the total estimated troop commitment being only 15,000 to 18,000 troops, the existing limited U.S. military footprint and specialized forces are not equipped for conventional warfare or a protracted nationwide insurgency in that kind of terrain.
Arrogance and poor planning seem to be repeating patterns.
The dismissal of regional experts who understand the insurgency potential, these were key factors in the previous failure, and the same disastrous pattern is repeating now. Any intervention would inevitably lead to a protracted, bloody insurgency, massive casualties, and a catastrophic strategic loss for the invading power.
Our sources compel us to look beyond active conflicts and deep into the political controversies that expose the underlying struggle between civilian governance and powerful institutions globally. We start with the enduring crisis of democracy in a major South Asian nation, Pakistan.
Pakistan's history, tragically, is a continuous, agonizing struggle for democracy. The country has never achieved true, stable democratic governance, constantly juggling power between the executive branch and its powerful, entrenched military establishment.
And this military dominance is largely due to long-standing security alliances with the U.S. and Western partners.
Dating back to the 1950s, yes. These alliances disproportionately funneled aid and legitimacy toward the military, cementing its political position over civilian leaders.
And we are seeing history repeat itself in a dramatic way, with the current populist imprisoned leader representing a direct challenge to that entrenched order.
This specific leader represents the most significant popular challenge to the military establishment since the 1970s.
And there's a powerful parallel there.
A very powerful one. That decade saw a former prime minister executed by a military-controlled Supreme Court in what analysts widely describe as a judicial murder after a sham trial.
And the current populist leader has flatly refused to play by the military's established rules.
The musical chair conventions, as they're called, the unwritten rule that politicians can be rotated in and out of power at the military's discreet discretion, he has insisted on true civilian supremacy.
And the political consequence of issuing that fundamental challenge to the established order has been swift and severe.
Indeed. The sources indicate that the kind of extensive coordinated regime change operation undertaken against this leader, involving sudden arrests, mass charges, and political exclusion, would not have been possible without the tacit approval and coordination of the American military establishment and intelligence community.
So the whole narrative is seen by regional analysts as a highly orchestrated move,
Designed solely to maintain the military's ultimate control over the political structure, effectively silencing a leader who refused to surrender or compromise with the military chief.
Now, let's pivot sharply to a very specific, chilling case of political sanctioning within Europe, the case of a Swiss colonel and intelligence expert. This demonstrates the stretching of international tools to address domestic dissent.
This case is deeply disturbing because it shows how a major intergovernmental union is utilizing foreign policy tools, sanctions, to address what is essentially critical commentary, and internal dissent.
And this is crossing ethical and legal lines that challenge basic human rights.
Absolutely. This Swiss colonel, an intelligence expert who previously worked with a major Western military alliance, was sanctioned by the European Union.
And the terms of these sanctions are profoundly severe and wide-reaching.
They are essentially a civil death penalty. The sanctions freeze all his bank accounts within the EU and prohibit anyone from providing him with any kind of resources, including financial or material support.
Any kind of resources.
The resource ban is so sweeping that friends attempting to order food for him from a non-EU country were blocked because the clearing banks would not allow the payment.
So he can't even purchase basic sustenance remotely.
No. Furthermore, he cannot travel back to his home country of Switzerland without an official, potentially lengthy exemption request to the EU, which fundamentally violates his basic human right to movement.
So the EU is using measures typically reserved for external enemies or international conflict to address what amounts to critical political commentary and dissent from an intelligence expert from one of its own neighbors.
That is the core analysis presented by our sources. It is a clear demonstration of using external policy measures to address domestic political issues and silence critics, operating outside of normal judicial channels, and without the ability for the sanctioned individual to mount a proper defense in court.
And this has become a major controversy in Switzerland.
A huge one. It's significantly fueling those who argue against closer integration with the EU, as citizens perceive this as a fundamental threat to democratic rights and the right to basic human existence. It illustrates a dangerous and unprecedented blurring of external and domestic political authority.
Finally, we must address the massive political and historical allegations contained in the newly unredacted files related to the historical assassination of a former U.S. president in November 1963.
A very heavy topic.
These revelations connect high-level foreign policy disputes to compromised figures within the U.S. intelligence community.
This segment is a deep dive into the historical origins of certain contemporary political forces. The newly unredacted files reveal crucial details about a central figure in the originally assassination investigation, a high-ranking CIA counterintelligence chief.
And what did these files reveal about him?
This chief had previously subverted the established U.S. policy of preventing a key allied country, Israel, from acquiring nuclear weapons capability.
His loyalty was to that allied country's security interests.
So profound that the head of their intelligence service praised him, according to the documents, as the biggest Zionist of them all. Critically, this CIA figure was later found to have actively hidden essential documents from the official assassination inquiry, the Warren Commission.
The implication is that a person integral to the official investigation was operating directly against the assassinated president's foreign policy goals and withheld evidence about the crime.
Absolutely. The conflict of interest is staggering.
And then we have a piece of corroborating information hidden in plain sight for decades.
Yes. The wife of a future Israeli prime minister, who was, at the time, the former deputy chief of staff of their military, wrote in her book that he was coincidentally in the assassination city, Dallas, just hours before the killing occurred in November 1963.
The timing of this presence by a figure deeply connected to the country whose nuclear program the president was aggressively trying to halt is remarkable.
It is.
And we must connect this back to the specific policies of the assassinated president. What was he doing that created such powerful, entrenched opposition?
The context is everything. The president who was killed had recently ordered U.S. intelligence to conduct a thorough investigation of Israel's nuclear facility in Dimona.
And he was attempting to force foreign lobbyists operating in Washington, D.C. to officially register as foreign agents.
Actions that directly countered the core interests of that country's military and political establishment, particularly regarding nuclear independence and political influence in the U.S. Capitol.
And those key policies were reversed almost immediately after his death.
Immediately. This whole nexus of allegations, a compromised CIA chief, hidden documents, and the coincidental high-level presence of foreign military leaders in the assassination city, suggests that a complex, powerful foreign entity, utilizing compromised allies inside the U.S. intelligence apparatus, may have been motivated and positioned to intervene decisively in the highest levels of U.S. governance to protect its strategic interests.
We've covered an immense spectrum of information today, learner, from the new weapons of global power AI and industrial supply chain control to ancient geopolitical grievances and the staggering structural fragility of modern logistical systems demonstrated vividly by the fate of that $10 tapered roller bearing.
What unites all these stories is the profound crisis of industrial, economic, and moral coherence within the established global power. The focus on short-term financialization, poor leadership decisions based on political wishful thinking, and the systemic choice to outsource core industrial and security capabilities are now leading to cascading systemic failures.
And these failures are everywhere.
Whether it is a lack of power generation for AI machines, the absence of refineries for critical minerals like gallium, or the collapse of an entire railway logistics system due to a missing precision component, the vulnerability is now exposed for the entire world to see.
The true measure of an empire, as we've repeatedly seen in these sources, is not merely the number of missiles it possesses, but the reliability of the industrial system that moves them, powers them, and supplies them with fuel and ammunition.
And today, those fundamental systems are demonstrably failing under pressure.
Okay, so here's the final provocative thought for you to consider as you process this deep dive.
If a single low-cost component, that $10 bearing, can bring the core logistics of a major military power to a grinding, catastrophic halt, what other tiny, neglected choke points exist within the world's most confident and complex systems?
Like in energy grids, financial clearinghouses?
Or core digital infrastructure waiting for the next major geopolitical pressure event to reveal their true catastrophic cost? That is the vulnerability you need to understand as you consider where the world is heading next.